I'm going to talk about the weasel family, and I got some slides, and the slides show some neat stuff about the weasels, but some of it shows some of my background too, and how I got started working on some of these critters. So you get to see pictures of me over the decades. I first started, I didn't see a weasel until I was in college. And, but when I was a kid, when my parents would tell me to go to bed, I got a flashlight and would read field guides under the sheets. And
oh, sure, field guides. Yeah.
Field guides. I've never run into anybody else who actually read field guides from cover to cover. And I think back about it now and I think, I was a really weird kid, but I'd always sort of dwell on the pages about weasels and thought they were really cool, except I just never saw any. But when in college, I had my first opportunity to live trap some weasels, and I started tracking them, and then I did my PhD work on fishers, mostly in the UP, but I trapped my first ones up here because Dave Beach had some extra radio collars, and I needed some practice live trapping the critters, and so I live trapped fishers and martins here and put radio collars on them. That was in the early 70s. And I spent 30 years in North Carolina at North Carolina State University as a faculty member. I did some work with weasels and fishers then. A lot of it was sort of helping other people with their research, modeling fisher populations and martin populations, and helping other people with their data, not as much actual work with the animals. Now I've got a fairly good-sized fisher project going in Northern California. But I just got a couple of spare radio collars that I think I'd like to put on some fishers here. They're really cool collars because they report to me every morning where the animal was yesterday by email. So they're really cool collars.
Wait a minute, you don't even have opposable phones. How do they do that?
The collars are cool because they talk to satellites, and then the satellites send the signal down to France, and in France they send the email to me, which is pretty spiffy. The collars are too heavy to put on females, the two that I have, but I could put them on males, and so I'm interested in maybe doing some fisher trapping around here. Anyway, the weasel family, I call them mighty mites because even though wolverines are pretty big, they're all on the small side, and they all have a presence that's bigger than each individual is. They're just really cool critters. In around here we got one bear. We've got 3 canids, red fox and coyotes and wolves. We got 2 or 3 felids, cats, depending on how you want to count them. We got bobcats, we got lynxes, and mountain lions come wandering through. We got 1 raccoon. Depending on how you count them, we've got at least 8 members of the weasel family. We got the 3 little weasels, least weasel, short-tailed weasel, long-tailed weasel. We've got minks. We've got martins and fishers. Wolverines come down now and then from Ontario. We got otters. Some people would count weasels still as members of, skunks still as members of the weasel family, but most people put them in their own family. Just go a little bit west, we got badgers and black-footed ferrets. These are really diverse critters, and we got a lot more of these predators around here than we have the other predators. But most people don't see them, and most people don't think about them. But they're just really, really cool. So, this is a male short-tailed weasel that some of my students caught up near Low Lake. This is a male long-tailed weasel. Long-tailed weasels are not common here. There'll be decades when we don't have any, and then the populations will expand north a little bit. We'll have them for a while, and then they go back south. All the weasels, the 3 little weasels, turn white in the wintertime. Here's a female longtail in the summertime, and they're pretty cryptic. They just fit right in. They're hard to see a lot of times. Least weasel, these are the littlest guys. They are smaller than an eastern chipmunk, and they're about as thick around as my thumb. They're just really cool little critters.
What are they called?
Least weasels. Yeah. We have minks, martins, fishers, wolverines now and then, otters, skunks. Skunks are actually pretty easy to get in. They're easy to trap. They're also fairly easy to let loose. And but you might not think that, but they are. Usually I have traps pretty well covered with branches and things, and look inside, see the skunk looking out at you, and sometimes on this trap I propped it open with a stick. If you can actually usually just open it with your hands if you're calm about it. The skunks are really clear. They tell you exactly what their intent is. They tap their feet, and they're really clear with that tapping, and it's loud, surprisingly loud. And then they chatter their teeth, and that's pretty loud too. And so they give you 2 warnings, and they're really nice to you. And so if you're letting them out of a trap, you can just sort of back off if they start tapping their feet too much. So they're pretty good about it. But usually they just sit in there and look at you. They're pretty self-confident critters, and for good reason. And so you open up the trap, and then they just sit there. And they usually wait till night to come out. You could sit there for hours, and they won't come out. You don't want to try to push them out, knock the cage or anything. You don't want to do that. Okay, these are the little guys, the 3 that we call weasels. And here's a long-tailed weasel, and needless to say, they have long tails, okay? And the tail is usually about 3/4 of the length of the body. It's variable. Short-tailed weasel has the short tail, usually less than half the length of the body, but variable. Both longtails and shorttails have a black tip on the end of the tail. I'll come back and talk about that. Least weasels are little guys, and they have short, stubby little tails without a black spot on it. Usually they got some little bits of black fur, just a few hairs there. Now these 2 are European critters, and I'll talk about them too, but this is what's called a weasel in Europe, and this is what's called a stoat. Now, stoats are short-tailed weasels, and weasels are least weasels, maybe, kind of, which gets confusing. I'll come back to that. What is a weasel? You know? We really have trouble with the names of these guys, because another name that comes up is ermine. An ermine is any weasel in the wintertime in the United States. In Eurasia, it's usually a stoat in the wintertime to have the black tip on the tail. For trappers, it's usually any of the 3 in North America would be ermines. The short-tailed weasel has ermine in its scientific name, Mustela erminia. So some people call short-tailed weasels ermines, even when they're brown. But they can't be, because they're ermines only when they're white. Long-tailed weasel is only found in North America, and it may be more closely related to minks than to the other weasels. When Europeans see our long-tailed weasel, they don't know what to call it, and sometimes they call it long-tailed stoats, because to them a weasel doesn't have a black tip on its tail, it's just a little jobber. All of this leads to confusion, and especially if you try to talk to somebody from someplace other than North America. or they would say it leads to confusion if they talk to somebody from North America. All of the little guys, excuse me, prey predominantly on small mammals. And the voles, these are the mice with short tails, and the redback vole is the most common vole here, are the most common prey for these guys. And everywhere you can find, everywhere that short-tailed weasels live, a female short-tailed weasel is the same diameter as the most common vole in that area. And the reason is they go down vole holes. And so voles are their major prey, and they hunt them on the surface of the ground. They hunt them under the ground. Now here's an area of grassland that's got a whole bunch of vole tunnels in it. You can see that the tunnel's moving here. Here's a hole here. You can see where the vole has sort of pushed up the grass a little bit, and sort of sometimes they'll lay thatch over the top. Sometimes they'll make tunnels through the grass, right on the surface, and pull the grass over the top to make surface tunnels. But the weasels go down the holes and go after them. In the wintertime, you can see weasel tracks. So they're a real characteristic track. All members of the family have the same kind of a track. It's two paw prints right next to each other with one just a little bit ahead. So you can see it. There's one here, 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 here. But the cool thing is, here's the tunnel. And the weasels go down under the snow. They spend most of their winter under the snow. They hunt the voles and other mice under the snow, right on the ground surface. It's a lot warmer down there too, because the snow acts as insulation. And the sugar snow is sort of this crystalline stuff right on the surface of the ground, and they can push through it. The voles make tunnels through the snow, and these guys go after the voles in the tunnels in the snow. They're just really nifty guys. In the wintertime, they can chow down on enough voles sometimes that it leads to the high reproductive output the following spring.
How many do they eat with
A female short-tailed weasel needs about a vole a day. A big male long-tail probably needs about 2 voles a day. And least weasels, if they get a vole, it lasts a day and a half or so. A least weasel is too small to eat an entire vole in one sitting. And so they need to sort of come back and eat a couple times a day on it. A short-tail, most short-tails can eat a vole in one sitting. Now, female short-tailed weasel usually weighs about 100 grams, which is about 4 ounces, which is about twice as much as a lot of the voles here. A lot of the voles are in between 1 up to 2 ounces. Some of the meadow voles